Well, if you remember back, right, Tyrone and Armagh warmed up in the same side of the pitch in 05. Okay.
Ulster final, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it was just all kind of, and it literally just took off around training and why do Dublin have the right to do this and why do they have the hill and all this sort of crack. So it was just brought up, and
David Brady, wasn't it?
It wasn't Brady. I don't know who brought it up, but it was. We were on the way on the bus, and it was like, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. And the way I remember it is that we sat down. David Heaney just goes, right, come on, let's go. So we all just went up. We had nothing set up. There was no warm-up. There was balls flying everywhere. Our nutritionist got hit in the head. She was knocked out. It was...
no.
Trevor Howley, there was a guy on our team, Trevor Howley. Tank of a man. And Dublin used to do this drill, 50 yards apart, kicking it to each other and moving, just to kick and move, Paddy, you know? And he stood in the middle. He must have taken 20 or 30 shoulders. He couldn't... He came on in the Laois quarter-final. He couldn't come on.
That's Andy Moore and Paddy Andrews there from episode 14 of the Football Pod, talking about the Mill at the Hill in 2006. Still available exclusively on the OTB Sports app. Later today, the podcast will be available on all platforms. This week's episode is a doozy. It's a deep dive into the Dublin Mayo rivalry, and right now on OTB AM, we're delighted to welcome both David Brady and the former Dublin boss Brady Pillar Caffrey to the show. David, I might start with you. Andy Moore's not giving you the credit there, but I think this was your brainchild. I think you were carefully, craftily hatching this for weeks.
You give a dog a bad name and it follows him.
Or a good name, David, a good name.
Good name. It was a collective decision, really. And you know what? You look back at it now, it really did spark what you call, and what I call, one of the greatest rivalries in GAA, especially over the last 15 years, when you look at it. It really has ignited, and it did ignite. And look at your Pillar. And you know, I was listening to Paddy and Andy and Tommy on the podcast, and look at there was and there is, when you're in that bubble, a hatred of your opposition, and the opposition for us that day was Dublin, and vice versa. They hated us, but that's continued. And you know what? I hated Pillar Caffrey, and every inch of him, for that 12 months, for that. Pillar, I remember us going over Connacht were playing Leinster in the Railway Cup final not so long afterwards.
Boston, yeah.
Yeah, and I went over, I only came back half the man because, as Adam Brogan told me, he says, Pillar singled you out, he says, take lumps out of Brady. This was about 4 or 5 months after that. Do you remember? It was about, I don't know, it was about 3, it wasn't too long after anyway.
John, he was manager of Connacht.
That's right.
I was with Val Andrews running Leinster.
Yeah.
We had about 6 dubs maybe starting, and the rest were obviously.
Yeah, and I knew.
And so we sold them the idea that this was our turn because it was mostly Mayo fellas.
Yeah, and as Alan says, the 6 dubs were told, take lumps out of Brady. So Pillar blamed me, but you know what? And like Pillar, we've had some great days outside the pitch since, and you know, before games, after games, and that's what it is. You're in that bubble, and as Andy and Paddy rightly said, you have no other focus but a deep conviction to not give your opposition any credit, and that's what's happened over the last 15, 16 years. We've had semi-final replays, we've had All-Ireland final replays, we've had unbelievable epic games that will go down in history, and again, we're on the cusp of another one coming this Saturday.
Paul, had you guys played against Mayo in the previous 5-6 seasons at all? I can't really remember, apart from some league games maybe.
Prior to that game in 06?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, look, Mayo, you know, we played in the National League and they would have the upper hand on us in National League games. We took a fair hammering under Tommy Lyons over in Ballina in the National League around that time. So look, Mayo were a very decent team, and that was just it, you know what I mean? We went in as favourites, but like there was a huge respect for Mayo. And you look back on that Mayo team, they had fair sprinkling of players, and I know Andy Morton's doing a lot with us at the moment now, and sure he came on and got the killer goal that day. But look, that Mayo team on paper it stand up very well even nowadays.
So what was your view of David Brady, the footballer, then, Paul?
Yeah, well, sure. Look, David was he was a tough boy, and he was a very competitive boy, and he was that type of player that, look, he wore his heart outside his jersey all the time. You knew when any team was lined up against the David Brady team that they were going to be very fired up, and I am convinced, David, that it was you that instigated that whole march to the hill. I'm sure you've got good mileage of it over the years. But look, that was a fantastic game to be involved in. We were heartbroken, obviously, having been 7 points up into the second half, and Mayo put in one of these great last 20 minutes. And, looking back at some of the clips of it and seeing Kieran MacDonald getting that wonderful score, like a player that deserved to play in an All-Ireland final, if not win one. Kevin O'Neill, who had a bit of a spell with Na Fianna around that time, came on as well, had a cameo, brilliant performance that day. So, you had Mortimer there, who was always good for scores and that. So, no, they were a classy team. And look, David, in fairness to him, he would have backed up that classy football with a bit of hardness and toughness around the middle, and a never say die type of guy in your ranks that every team needs. What
is your overriding emotion, Paul, when you see that Mayo are down at the hill?
Well, I suppose immediately Paul Clark had gone out to put out the cones for our warm-up, and he came in, he says, "Pillar, we have a problem. Mayo were down there." And I says, "What?" And he says, "Yeah." So I just said, "Look, it's not a problem, Paul." I said, we turned around and said to the players, "What you want to do? Mayo are down there." And they said, "Pillar, we're going down on top of them." And I said, "Right, fine." I remembered my brother John had been involved in Tyrone, Dublin, All-Ireland. I think it was a semi-final as well. And Tyrone went down to the hill end, something similar under Kevin Heffernan. And that was in my mind, that is, if we go down to the canal end, and loads of people voiced opinions after and said we should have just ignored it and go down to canal end. And you know what? If we went down to canal end and lost the game the way we did, people had said that we'd lost before the ball was thrown in. So in my mind, once the players were comfortable that they wanted to make that decision, obviously it was a bit unfortunate that things got a little bit out of hand in the physio got a bang of a ball, and that wasn't nice and wasn't pleasant. Myself and John Morrison had a little chat, and that was all good and fun at the time. But no, look, I would have no regrets over what we did, because I do firmly believe that, look, there were precedent set there that Dublin went down on top of Tyrone that day, and that was still fairly fresh in my memory, obviously with my brother John involved. So look, we got into a bit of bother afterwards, and the rest is history. Mayo had a great win against us, and they went on to contest the All-Ireland final.
I mean, the rest is history, but you guys actually start the game way better than they do. So the whole kind of thing about the mill at the hill having any impact on the outcome of the match is just wrong, right?
No, and a lot of people missed that point that we actually did start and settle very well. So no, look, that would it would bring to the conclusion that it didn't rattle us. And I don't think it did rattle us. I just think it created an unbelievable atmosphere before the ball was thrown in. Croke Park, full house, and people, all of a sudden, there's something to watch before the game starts. It created a huge volume of noise coming from both sets of supporters.
David, was there any part of your mind that was like taking you back to 96 and the brawl at all? Like, was there something about that moment where you were like, okay, I've seen this one before?
But I suppose when you look at it, I was 2006. That was the last time I played in Croke Park. That was more or less the last time. I was the senior player on the panel at the time, and it gave me an opportunity, because I wasn't starting that day, to say, right, how do we control this, or how do we actually try and make it to our advantage? When the Somatel, myself and Brian Talty, who I have a great respect for, we had some very strong words over at the near the Hill 16 side, and you know what? When I seen Peter giving John Morrison and all the rest of them the dunt in the back with the shoulder, I said, "This could go awful. This could go crazy altogether."
Not shoulder.
A shoulder.
I thought it was a fair charge, shoulder to shoulder. I think it
was. was him facing the hill, and you were into the back of him. And Pillar, you go there's the Dublin manager, a well-respected member of the Garda Síochána, and all hell is breaking loose. But it was, for us, I think there was a moment we just gathered the players over and said, guys, whatever happens, whatever is thrown at you from here on in, do not retaliate. And I think that would be Pillar's message to his players, because there could have been a spark at the start of that game, and you could have had a red card, or you could have had a schmozzle with guys sent off. But again, it was just saying, look, focus on what we have to do, focus on the start, and focus on our strategy and game plan. But it was probably the longest warm up in the history of the GAA, because it extended between injuries and our dietitian getting knocked out, and it just, and you know, when the sideshow finished, the quality of football, in all fairness, throughout from both sides, was unbelievable, and it was an absolute classic. I remember we were 6 points down, and I came on and I'm going, right, I've got one job here, to try and create a flow or to gain momentum from our side. And next thing we go 7 points down. I said, that worked well. So 7 points down, and you go, right, next ball. And I firmly believe, and look, we have what we have on Saturday. But for me, the connection I had with David Clark as a goalkeeper, it allowed me to influence the kickouts. We didn't allow them to come down the middle and be contested. We chipped 4. We got 4 out of 5 in a row under the Hogan. And that, for me, that connection, and I had said it to Clarkie, look for the chip to the right. I'll be on my left. And that kind of thing is vital to try and create flow. And look at Stephen Cluxton has dictated and delivered that flow for Dublin over the last 10 or 15 years. But again, it goes down once that game is over. It was the only time I ever needed security going out in Dublin that night. We were assigned two security guards, and we were told to all stay together just in case. But and that's the beauty of it. We've had lovely times down through the years afterwards with them players. My arch enemy was Kieran Whelan, sound as a pound. Great respect. Alan Brogan, neighbour up the road, great respect. Bernard, all them guys, and it's and that's what football is about. And you see it from back in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. The respect that you have for your fellow footballers.
Now you do, David. But like that night, did you all go out and have pints, or what was the crack?
Oh, we went out. We went out en masse. Now, let me tell you that.
But not with the Dubs.
Oh, jeez, no. I wouldn't. And Paddy, I wouldn't talk to any of my opposition players, whether it was Pádraig Joyce in Galway or Kieran Whelan, in any way, shape or form, until I had the boots thrown away. And I think it's a bit different now, because guys are more integrated in Sigerson and college and whatnot, but no way. And Paddy said it as well in the podcast. He said he wouldn't have talked to Andy Moore in bar 2 seconds over 10 years, because they're the ones that want to take your crown. They're the ones that your greatest enemy, and that's the I suppose that's the mindset of battle and competition, and for me it never changed. I only started talking to them afterwards, and it's like that in sporting context.
It's a funny story in relation to that, David. Just backing up the way it was then. The following year, we played in the first floodlit game in Croke Park against Tyrone, the opening round of the National League. And again, look, 72,000 people in Croke Park, or 80,000 for a National League game, night game, fantastic atmosphere. And Croke Park, in fairness, wanted to do something, acknowledge the players. So the players' lounge was only opened around that time. So they decided to invite both sets of players in afterwards to have a drink in each other's company after the game. But the game went ahead, and we lost by a point, and there was a couple of sending offs, and there was a bit of argy-bargy and whatever. But in we go into players' lounge. Not one Dublin player and Tyrone player mixed. Tyrone went to their corner, all stood around. They had no interest in having a drink or anything like that. I think they were formed a circle around Owen Mulligan. He was able to sneak a few pints in. He's seen him. And our fellas stood around and they're over to me, Pillar, when can we leave? When can we leave? And that's just the way it was then. There was no mixing teams. Like, you know, Tyrone were obviously huge rivals to us. They had the upper hand on us all during that period. And, you know, they had no interest in chatting to us and we had no interest in chatting to them. And that's unfortunately, it has changed. I would agree with more and more of these fellas playing serious football in colleges and, you know, cigarettes and competitions and more of the mixing and then lodging together and all that. That bond has sort of forged. They're more sociable now than they were. But back then, no, you know, you would use the word, you hated the opposition, and particularly the opposition that was in your spot, whether it was, you know, Mayo and us or Tyrone and us or whatever. There was always that edge to it. So socially, even in relation to that Railway Cup competition, like we happened to win that final over there, and you know, for us, the Dubs that were involved in it, we felt brilliant about it. You know, after Mayo doing us the previous August, and but there was no mixing with the two teams afterwards. It was a function the following night, and I remember ending up down somewhere with yourself and your brother David. We were struggling to get into some spot or whatever, but there was very little mixing went on in terms of the two squads. It was very much we're still on duty here. We're still inter-county players, even though it's an end of season competition or whatever.
Paul, just on that Dublin team around that time, like ever since Dublin made the breakthrough, they haven't lost an All-Ireland final. Was Everest, in your view, actually getting to an All-Ireland final at that point? Do you think he would have won an All-Ireland had he got there?
Yeah, no, and look, it's very clear in my own mind, you can't win an All-Ireland until you get to the final. And while we had a rocky road in Leinster, you know, I was involved for 3 years with Tommy Lyons, and we only managed to win one of them Leinster titles, and that was the only one won 2002. It hadn't been won since 95, and they won the All-Ireland that year. So there was a barren spell, and you know, Laois and Westmeath were filling the void, and they were putting their hand up, and Meath hadn't gone away; they were still around. So we very much said, look, what are we capable of doing immediately? And you know, as a group, we talked about it, we discussed it. We are capable of winning Leinster, absolutely. We got our house in order and targeted that. And then look, there was the All-Ireland quarterfinals every year there. So it was a different competition in our own minds, but we just felt within the group in 2005, and we had no business talking about winning All-Ireland from the platform we were coming from. We hadn't got strong enough base. We weren't certain enough of ourselves in Leinster. And so, you know, obviously Tyrone and Kerry were brilliant around that period also. So they were swapping All Irelands, you know, each year, but they weren't in our sights other than if we met them, we'd prepare and we would try and beat them and take them out of it. But the goal was very much, look, dominate Leinster, try and win Leinster every year, then see what the draw takes us. And it was to get to an All Ireland final and then see, are we good enough to take the next step? So absolutely, getting to the final was going to be a huge part of our journey. And that's why, look, when I look back, I would have disappointment in my 4 years in charge that we were very close the 4 years, but we still never got to an All-Ireland final. And I think the players themselves needed to get there and experience it and feel it, and then say, look, we either have another step to take on this journey, or we're right in the mix now and we can go back next year and win one. But having said that, like after that Mayo defeat, you know, after 10 or 15 minutes in Croke Park and that All-Ireland final day, and I think Kerry had banged in 2 or 3 early goals or whatever, I just shook my head and I said, Jesus, you know, that could have been us out there. And it was a lonely little place for Mayo that day, you know, and that's, I suppose, in the back of your head, you're thinking, look, next Saturday night is only a semi-final too. Like, whoever wins it has to go on and do the business. And while, you know, I know we talk about the game in due course, but there's a huge amount riding on it, but only if you win the All-Ireland, because look, both of these teams, okay, Dublin are on the run they're on, and look, Mayo are, like, they've so much heartbreak in finals in the last number while I don't think it'll be celebrated like it was back then and beating Dublin in the semi-final. They'll know their business is to try and win an All-Ireland, not to get to another final.
Well, let's talk about that game then, DB. How close are this Mayo team to being able to win an All-Ireland at the moment? Are they close enough that they can beat the Dubs in your mind this weekend?
I think they're close enough to push Dublin all the way. and that's from a 0 to 70-minute game. And they have that. And they've proved that time in, time out, no matter what. They haven't bet Dublin in a long, long time. Something like nearly 10 years of competitive championship football. You know, it's vital. It's vital that Mayo understand and learn from mistakes of the past. And I could have been here the week before Christmas talking about the same. They need to learn from the mistakes of the past, both from a player's perspective and from a management and a tactics perspective. Like 15 seconds in the All-Ireland final in December, goal straight in. One of the fastest goals in the history of the GAA All-Irelands. You're going, it had to be Mayo to give it away. But it's like this. Mayo have been sucker punched and knocked out by Dublin, and they've stood up again, and they're coming at them, and they're coming at them, and they're here again. And it's not that Dublin fear Mayo, but I'm telling you now, Dublin realise what they're coming up against. Any Mayo team, and especially this kind of group of players that have showed massive tenacity and resilience time and time again. We need to get our matchups right. And more people are telling me, DB, you'll beat them. And I'm going, you're only thinking that. Because the reality is, you're missing the likes of Brendan Harrison, all-star defender. You're missing the likes of Jason Doherty, who has consistently performed in our Ireland semi-finals and finals from a right half-forward position. You're missing Cillian O'Connor, who's gone, who's your main talisman. That'd be like Dublin missing Conor Callahan and Kieran Kilkenny, both gone together. That's the enormity of Cillian O'Connor gone. But you say, you're right, you regroup. We have to learn again from the All-Ireland final last year. Not alone just giving away soft chances, but we didn't finish strong. Like there was a period, and you can't let Dublin dictate the pace. Like we had a man down, we were an extra man from half-time onwards. And in that period, we had a man extra, and Mayo had less possession than Dublin. And once that period finished, Mayo didn't score for 12, 13 minutes. And Dublin just pushed on and wiped the game out by the 62nd, 65th minute. Like that can't be allowed to happen. And again, we were too defensive in my mind. We brought on Michael Plunkett, and we were very defensive in that first 10 minutes. That was the time to go for the juggler and really try and put your stamp on the game and push ahead.
But that was a reaction to the semi-final the previous year, where in those 10 minutes the game had been completely lost by the blitz that Dublin produced the greatest football of any era that we've seen from them in many respects. I can see why they would have done that, but I buy your point that you have to adapt. Like you need to be the Terminator and completely change in the middle of games and respond to what the Dubs are doing. Paul, what's your level of confidence like at the moment? And we're nearly out of time here, but where's Desi's evolution of the team at the moment? Where are they?
Yeah, look, it's fascinating to actually think about it, because like I've no doubt Dublin are on the downward curve from the greatest team we've ever seen in Dublin here. There is slippage, you know, in lots of things. You can't lose, you know, Stephen Cluxton, Paul Mannion, Jack McCaffrey, even someone like Eric Lowndes stepping away. Just some things aren't fitting right in terms of when you're looking in from outside. Are Dublin vulnerable? Absolutely. I think more vulnerable than they have been. We can't really get a read on the 3 games in Leinster because, you know, they were monotonous to look at. They were, you know, won by 6, 7, 8 points, and you didn't get any flavour that, Dublin are evolving, Dublin are improving. If anything, you're saying, you know, there is a bit of slippage there. But look, Desi would have known, look, Leinster was very winnable no matter who was playing. Now, semi-final, this is where you have to come with your A game. There will be massive respect for what Mayo are capable of doing as per the second half against Galway. But look, they will know that I'm not sure about the Mayo 6 forwards. Are they going to be able to, you know, tack up 22, 23 points or the equivalent of to beat Dublin in a shootout? I think we could be in for a fantastic game because Mayo only know one way of playing, and they're not going to sit back like Kildare did and try and take it on the chin and do a counter-attack. They'll come at Dublin last serious question. On small back fit and on Murchie back fit, I think Desi has better options now than he has since last year's All-Ireland final. And I suppose for us Dubs, it's intriguing to think, look, what way is he going to line them out? Are small and more.
Oh, we're just having some trouble with the line.
To start line up, will that release midfielder? Sorry?
We're just having a bit of trouble with the line there, Paul. We're nearly finished anyway, so I'll let you go and say thanks very much. I'm going to get last word, one word predictions if the line holds up for you, Paul. Is it Dublin going to win?
Dublin by 2 points.
Right, good stuff. And DV, I know you're not going to predict against Mayo, but you're saying that it's going to be in the melting pot in the 73rd, 74th minute.
It is, and I do think that the likes of Tommy Conroy, who has unbelievable ability, we can't allow him to be tied up. I honestly think this is one of the best opportunities, regardless of the players we're missing. And I think it creates. Think about it. What we have is Curry potentially not playing a semi-final. Curry potentially not getting a right go at Tyrone, a full-strength Tyrone team. This game takes on a massive asset to say, you know what, these guys have been tried, have been tested, have been put to the pin of their collar in a semi-final. Whoever wins it goes into a final, without doubt. I don't care if it's Mayo. They win. They beat Dublin, the first team to beat them since Donegal in how many years? They'll be favourites by.
All right, good stuff. The appetite is suitably wet. My thanks to both of you for bringing us your memories of the Mill at the Hill. It's Paul Caffrey and David Brady giving us their thoughts there. It's a good point. Kerry don't play Tyrone, get a shoot into the All-Ireland final. The decision not to play the Munster final in Croke Park, it'll be their first game in Croke Park this year.
Yeah, first game in Croke Park since they lost the All-Ireland in 2019. They drew the previous game in Croke Park and they drew the previous game to that in Croke Park. And then
Mayo be on a roll, 3 games in a row.
Last time Kerry played Mayo in Croke Park, Mayo won in the league final of 2019. 2017 then was the last time they played in Croke Park. Before that, Mayo won.
Right.
They drew that game. And Mayo and Kerry in Croke Park is not as
straightforward as you might think. OTB AM brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. We're going to hear from Stephen Doyle in Greece as Bows get set to take on PAOK in the Europa Conference League. Right now, we're going to bring you boxing writer Trish Dixon in conversation with Joe about his new book, Boxing and Brain Trauma.